In the days leading up to the APEC Summit in South Korea, a partial deal was struck between the United States and China, underscoring the evolving and at times turbulent dynamics of global trade diplomacy. The meeting between President Donald J. Trump and President Xi Jinping, conducted ahead of the formal opening of the summit, offered a striking illustration of both cooperation and constraint. He said U.S. President Donald Trump and China's leader Xi Jinping made a partial deal ahead of the APEC Summit in South Korea. That deal, while not comprehensive, reflects an ongoing pattern in which the two economic superpowers signal willingness to engage, yet stop short of full resolution. The atmosphere was cordial at first. Great pleasure. Good to see you again. Good to see you again. These words greeted the handshake and conversation between the two leaders. A friendly refrain, but the scene that followed was less reassuring. President Trump departed before the formal start of the summit, a move that underlined the difficulties confronting APEC's efforts. Experts note that behind this moment lie deeper issues, specifically the inability to forge meaningful bilateral trade agreements when the US and China remain locked in strategic competition rather than joining with the other members of the Asia-Pacific Forum. One analyst put it plainly: we cannot have any meaningful agreement in terms of bilateral trade as long as China and US are not cooperating with the other countries. It seems like China doesn't care about any other countries except the US, and Trump seems like he doesn't care about any other countries except China. What this speaker identifies is a structural challenge. For the past several decades, the 21-nation APEC grouping has sought to promote trade liberalization, economic integration, and regional cooperation. The China-US relationship is central to that mission. Yet when those two powers focus primarily on one another rather than the ensemble of states, the capacity of the forum to deliver broader results is diminished. In addition to trade, the summit has in recent years taken up other agendas: climate change, digital economy, increasingly artificial intelligence. But the drive to build consensus across such a broad agenda runs into familiar obstacles. On the ground in South Korea, some of the hurdles were visible: protests near the venue, closed-door meetings insulated from public view, and a persistent gap between high-level rhetoric and formal deliverables. One voice offered a blunt admission: I think most people probably don't know about it. I don't know exactly what work they do, but I understand that economic leaders from various countries around the world gather to discuss how the global economy should move forward. Alongside trade, APEC has been focusing on the fight against climate change, a once easy to agree on issue now also deeply contentious. That outsider's perspective speaks volumes. For many citizens in the Asia-Pacific region, APEC remains opaque, a gathering of technocrats in suits rather than a forum whose decisions visibly shape their lives. The frustration is palpable. What should be a driver of regional growth and cooperation is increasingly seen as a quiet annual ritual. In fact, a particularly jarring phrase emerged: this climate change, it's the greatest conch job ever perpetrated on the world. In my opinion, declared one participant. Whether that remark reflects a fringe view or a broader skepticism is less important than the fact that it raises the question: can a multilateral economic body pivot into genuinely ambitious climate action when internal differences are so stark? Still, economists and trade policy analysts say that the bloc remains relevant and may be more important now than ever. With rising protectionism, global supply chain disruptions, and the shift of economic gravity toward Asia, APEC's mission of free trade and regional integration remains central, but relevance is not the same as effectiveness. As one analyst put it, it's not just being a headache to APEC, it's actually a headache for the whole world. And that, in essence, is the key takeaway from the meeting in South Korea. What happens, and perhaps more importantly, what doesn't happen within APEC offers a window into the broader trajectory of global cooperation. From trade to climate change to the fast-emerging realm of artificial intelligence, the outcomes here matter far beyond the conference rooms of the summit venue. He said, so what happens or doesn't happen behind closed doors here in South Korea may offer a glimpse into the future not only for APEC, but on global cooperation from trade to climate change, and the future of AI in reviewing the negotiation between the US and China. Several points stand out. First, the decision by President Trump to leave before the formal start of the summit was read by many as a sign of impatience, or perhaps calculated prioritization. The bilateral meeting had been secured, and the formal multilateral process was less central to his interests. That raises important questions about role and leadership within APEC. When the two largest economies act as if their bilateral track is sufficient, what incentive remains for the smaller members to invest in the multilateral process? Second, the language of the partial deal was vague. Partial means limited commitments, selective cooperation. Neither side committed to sweeping reforms or binding new frameworks. Given the tensions that have dogged U.S.-China economic relations in recent years, tariffs, supply chain decoupling, disputes over technology transfers, and geo-economic rivalry, a modest outcome may reflect realism, but it also signals a missed opportunity. Third, the broader APEC agenda is under pressure. Trade liberalisation, once the core glue of the forum, has lost momentum given the rise of bilateral and plurilateral initiatives, changing global supply chain logic, and geopolitical competition. An economic body built in the 1980s and 1990s for a particular moment now finds itself navigating a world in which economic and strategic lines are redrawn. Climate and AI were added later to expand relevance, but they bring their own tensions. Climate action requires more collective alignment, while AI raises major sovereignty and security questions. The protests surrounding the summit reflect a further challenge: the difficulty of making multilateral elite gatherings resonate with ordinary citizens. Where large chunks of the public don't know or care about APEC's inner workings, the legitimacy of the process may erode. And when outcomes appear scant or favour the largest players, the perception of the forum as exclusive grows. Despite these headwinds, supporters maintain that APEC has a vital role. The Asia-Pacific region remains central to global economic growth. Trade liberalisation among its members, even if incremental, contributes to consumer price stability, investment flows, market access and resilience against shocks. The US and China, by virtue of their size and economic reach, set signals. Their posture toward APEC influences whether the forum is a bridge or yet another theatre for sup-power rivalry. What then should we watch next? Several indicators will matter: whether the partial deal between the US and China moves from rhetoric to implementation, whether smaller APEC members feel engaged and see benefit, whether climate and AI agendas are embedded into meaningful frameworks rather than broad declarations, and whether the institution adapts to strengthen transparency, public engagement, and relevance. In the immediate term, the partial deal at this summit may create breathing room, less escalation of tariffs, softer language on supply chain decoupling, perhaps a signal that US and China are willing to manage rivalry. But breathing room is not peace. It's merely a lull. Without deeper alignment, the structural tensions remain. For APEC itself, the pressing question is whether it can move from symbolic to substantive. The era of big multilateral trade deals, think Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation's early days, has passed. We're now in a more fragmented world. A PEC must either redefine its niche, perhaps as a facilitator of digital economy standards, climate technology deployment, supply chain resilience, or regional AI governance, or risk being sidelined. As the summit wraps, the broader message is cautionary. Big names and photo ops alone do not guarantee progress. The handshake between President Trump and President Xi may have generated headlines, but the real work lies in sustained, visible cooperation involving many states, not just the two largest. The comments dropping into the public domain reflect widespread uncertainty. Some citizens don't even know what APEC does. Others view it as remote. Analysts call it a headache for the whole world. If APEC is to matter, it must make itself matter outside of boardrooms. It must deliver for the people of the region. That means trade policies that reduce costs, not just for big exporters, but small businesses and workers. It means climate commitments that turn into investment in renewable energy across Southeast Asia, Pacific Islands, and emerging economies. It means AI governance frameworks that protect data rights, ensure equity, and manage risk. And the two superpowers, their relationship will, for the foreseeable future, shape the strength and direction of the Asia-Pacific economic order. If they cooperate, APEC can ride a wave of opportunity. If they focus solely on zero-sum calculations, APEC risks becoming a sideshow. In the end, the summit in South Korea is less about a singular headline than a continuing arc. The partial deal may be a first turn, But for the arc to curve toward meaningful cooperation, we will need more than handshakes. We will need transparency, follow through, and institutions that extend beyond the leaders' jets. He said, don't miss out and get the full picture. Subscribe for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead. That closing call to action underscores that in a world of shifting economic alliances, staying informed is no longer optional, it's essential. We'll continue tracking how the partial deal between Washington and Beijing unfolds, how the member states of APEC respond, and whether this summit becomes a pivot point or just another page in a long book of uneasy multilateralism. Thank you for joining us.